Hi, I'm Randy Christian with the Essential Faith Project, and this is the Essential Disciple. Now, I want to talk to you today about what I believe is probably the most foundational of all the things that we do as disciples, or in discipleship of Jesus. Now, if you don't understand what that is, then I want to encourage you to look at our last podcast where we talk about what discipleship actually is from a biblical perspective. But in that podcast, I shared that we were going to be talking about 9 different essentials, actually 7, but 2 of them I subdivide and break down. And one of those, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is the most important of all of these. In other words, this is where we start. And not just where we start as though we get it done and then we're done with it, but where we keep coming back, where we constantly develop our discipleship with Jesus, and that is personal worship or devotion. Devotion to Jesus himself. Now, I'm not talking about devotions. I'm not talking about just one thing that we might do or one form that we might do that in. When I became a Christian, it was very popular to talk about having devotions. Oddly enough, I don't hear that near as much today. But usually what that meant was getting up earlier, half an hour than what you were going to be getting up anyway, and spending specific time in prayer and in Bible study. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that if that is something that works for you. And certainly, spending time in prayer and Bible study every day is important and something that we should all be doing. Now, whether or not that happens when you first get up, I personally believe that depends on who you are. When I try to do that, I find myself literally falling asleep because I am not a morning person, and if I just sit and try to read or be really quiet when I first get up, I'm not staying awake. That's just the way it is. So for me, devotion expresses itself a little bit differently. So let's look at that word devotion. The dictionary talks about devotion as profound dedication. Now, dedication is the allocation of resources to a specific person or purpose or project. Okay? That's what dedication is, according to the dictionary. And it can mean anything. It means the things that we have, the physical possessions that we have. It means our money, absolutely. It means our time. It means our gifts, the use of the abilities that God has allowed us to have. And we need to be careful not to be caught in the trap that many evangelicals have of trying to identify one specific spiritual gift, because the Bible does not anywhere say that Christians all have one specific spiritual gift, or for that matter, that the spiritual gifts that God has given us are all miraculous. If you do a comprehensive study of the New Testament and the terms spiritual gift, you'll find things like faith or love are listed as spiritual gifts. In fact, a case could be made that the ability to live in a marriage or the ability to live as a single person are both spiritual gifts. But that's not what we mean. What we mean is anything that he gives us is to be dedicated to him. Even people, the relationships that we have, the closest relationships as we grow from youth into adulthood, if we get married, that marriage, the relationship with our spouse is to be dedicated to him. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important that we not get caught in what the Bible calls unequally yoked relationships. How can I dedicate a marriage to the Lord when my spouse does not belong to the Lord? It doesn't work. So we need to be sure that whatever we are and whatever we have, we're saying it is devoted to him. But what about this devotion? If it's not just devotion, it's profound not just dedication, excuse me, it's profound dedication. It means that it is a dedication at a level beyond anything else. It is a priority beyond anything else. It is something that is so important to us that we literally see it as the purpose of our life. And for the Christian, certainly our relationship with Jesus should take that on. There can be nothing more important in our life than our relationship with Jesus himself, because we believe with John, in the first chapter of John, that Jesus is God who became flesh. So we're talking about our relationship with God. Now, we talk a lot in the church about loving Jesus, about our personal relationship with him and getting close to him. And those are not just figures of speech. But we don't love Jesus the same way that we love, for example, brothers and sisters. Because our brothers and sisters are our equals and Jesus is God. We certainly don't love Jesus the same way that we would love a spouse. A spouse is a unique relationship where we literally pair off and finish each other, complete each other. But there are things from that relationship that we can learn that will help us in understanding our relationship, our devotion to Jesus. One of the things, though, that I'm going to bring us back to is what a disciple does. And that is, a disciple is somebody who is constantly learning and obeying the commands of Jesus, all of them. Jesus said in Matthew 28 that we make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey or to keep, to guard, to practice. The word is a rich word, and it can mean all of that all at once. All that he commanded. Now, how do we do that? Well, let's go back and look at the one major metaphor that Jesus himself and that even in the Old Testament that Yahweh uses to describe the relationship that he has with his people, and it's marriage. Now, I have the honor of having been a sharer of life with my wife for now 49 and a half years. And yes, we're absolutely looking forward to that milestone of 50 years, although we have to be careful because the reality is that as soon as we hit that 50 years, we continue. Now we've got 50 years in 1 day and 2 days and 3 days and on and on. And the devotion that we have for each other doesn't stop. In fact, if it's real, it's going to continue to grow. It's going to take on a different form in many ways. My relationship with my wife is very different today than it was when we had been married for a year, or for that matter, 5 years, or 10 years, or 15 years. It is partially influenced by where I am in my life. I'm limited by my own experiences and my own maturity, my own understanding of what marriage is. We're talking about my relationship with her, and of what my relationship with God is when we're talking about my devotion to Jesus. But here's the things that are similar. Number one, we live together. Marriage is a sharing of life. I cannot literally, after this many years, I cannot picture living without my wife. And while I know it will happen, and I know that the odds of us going at exactly the same time to be home with Jesus are pretty slim, I'll be honest with you, I have prayed for that many times because I just can't imagine one of us living without the other. It just doesn't seem to be life. We're that close. We're that much a part of each other's life. Now, when we first start in our faith, we have a whole life that we have not consciously run by Jesus, so to speak, or handed over to him. We hand him everything to begin with, but it's here's my whole life, Lord. But as we grow, as we are becoming more and more faithful to him, what we do is we run each of those pieces of our life by him. And we say, Lord, what about this? Or how am I to live this way? What does faithful look like in this situation? And more importantly, perhaps than anything else, and certainly a difference than marriage, how do I obey you in this aspect of my life? John wrote in 1 John 5:3 that our love for Jesus is shown by our obedience to his commands. So we show him our devotion and our love by recognizing he is Lord. And as close as we are, and he himself calls us brothers and friends, we still obey him. Now, in order to do that, we need to spend time with him. Now, he has made himself available to us all the time. In fact, right after that Great Commission that I quoted earlier, he says, "And I will be with you always, even to the end of this age." So Jesus, who is no longer limited by a purely physical body, he has the only permanently resurrected body at this stage. Jesus is with us. There's no time when he's not. He's right now in this room as I record this. And as you're watching it, he's sitting next to you, or maybe standing, I don't know. And with you as you listen to it and as you evaluate, how does this affect my relationship with him? Every decision that we make, every behavior that we engage in, every thought, Jesus is there for. And so as we realize this, we begin to shape our life more and more and more to fit someone who is with Jesus. And we become not worthy of him, but the scriptural word that is translated worthy literally means appropriate to him. We become like two parts of a wheel. In fact, the word is axios, and it's where we get our word axle. The two parts of a wheel that are joined together and appropriate to each other. Now, spending that time is a function of our awareness. We need to constantly be aware in our devotion to him that he's here. That this situation, whatever I'm doing, as simple as sitting and watching TV, as praying, as riding down the street in our cars, as working, whatever our job is, any of those things, we can ask ourselves, what does it mean to be faithful to him in this circumstance? Now, if we're not sure, then we have the second aspect that is common in marriage, hopefully, communication. As a marriage counselor, I teach communication constantly. It's one of those things that almost every couple I ever work with, we deal with not only the aspects of communication, but the practice of communication. Because we're simply not used to opening ourselves up to all aspects of that communication as we share that with someone else. Now, our relationship with Jesus should be the closest that we have with anybody. And so we need to practice our communication with him so that it is constantly becoming closer and closer and closer. And then we get to know him more, and that guides our actions. When we're asking ourselves, what should I do today? What do I want to do today even? Those become more and more informed by our relationship with Jesus. The more we are close to him, the more we're aware of him, the more we're talking to him, the more our actions are shaped by that. Until finally we can, with Paul, say, whatever we do, whether it's in word or deed, I would add even thought, we can do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father. That's Colossians 3:17. So, what is personal devotion to Jesus? It is the root of discipleship. Everything else we're going to talk about prayer, Bible study, corporate worship, serving, giving, sharing our faith, being in relationships with people. All of that, the effectiveness of it, the quality of it, will be determined by how we are in our personal devotion to Jesus. We don't do this to earn anything, because we don't earn anything from it. We don't earn Jesus' love. If Jesus didn't love us already, we wouldn't even have the opportunity to do this. That's a given. But instead, this is an expression of our love for him. Now, the next of the essentials is taking this devotion and realizing that we don't do this by ourselves, but we do it in community, what the scriptures call the church. So we're going to be talking next about congregational or corporate worship as an essential of spiritual health.